Hello, um, good day. I am Becky Blackshaw. I am the consulting manager for data and analytics team at Fusion 5, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. Sitting to the left of me and also on the screen is Wouter de Vos. Wouter is our practice manager at Fusion 5 for the data and analytics and CPM team. Wouter will be helping me today with questions and organization of the webinar. So I think welcome everybody, and without further ado, I might launch into my slides. I would like to add that if you have questions, can you please put them into the questions window, and Wouter will monitor those questions, and we will address those as we progress through the deck. All right. Today, we're going to talk about implementing an effective data governance strategy, and a topic close and dear to my heart. And I think one of the things I've learned over my journey with data governance is that how to turn talk into action has been one of my great learnings over the last few years. I am Becky Blackshaw, Consulting Manager for Data and Analytics. I'm a part of the Corporate Performance and Data Management team, CPM pillar at Fusion 5. A little bit about that pillar and then a little bit about myself. The Fusion 5 CPM pillar has 4 main capabilities. We do data management, we do analytics, we do planning, and we do automation. So this particular pillar is around improving performance for businesses. Within the data management area, where I look after is data architecture. We look at access and security, quality and governance, data engineering, transformation and modeling. Also part of the team is our analytics team, reporting, actionable insights and dashboards. I think one of the key things to say about this particular part of the CPM team is we're very much product agnostic. So we really work with whatever our customers wish us to work with. Right, a little bit about myself. I have not long joined Fusion 5. Prior to working at Fusion 5, I was the general manager for data and analytics for Downer Group. I've worked at Downer for a good many years. Shared a number of roles across Downer. The last 7 years primarily were working as knowledge manager and then as general manager for data and analytics for the team. Prior to Downer, I did a considerable amount of consulting, and I also did a considerable amount of lecturing in information systems management. And prior to that, I had a little consulting business where we did technical communication. So I've got a long history in thinking about governance, data governance, and information management and knowledge management. What I want to talk about today is the situation that I think many businesses in New Zealand, Australia find themselves in, probably around the world. And I want to sort of back that up with some statistics and talk a little bit about maturity and the growing maturity in governance. And then I want to talk a little bit about some practical activities in terms of implementing a strategy for delivering data governance. And then we'll close up with a little bit of partnering with Fusion 5. Please remind you, don't forget questions. If you've got questions, please type them into the questions box. Wouter will give me the high sign every now and again when there's a good question, and we'll break and have do that. So we'll do questions along the path. All right. Where do we find ourselves today? And I think it would be fair to say that I'm talking a great deal about my own experience at Downer when we talk about this situation that we found ourselves in. We invested in technology. We had a data warehouse, we had marts, we had reporting and dashboards. And we certainly had one or more grand data governance strategy assessments with some good vendors and partners. we had some strategy and some frameworks. And somewhere along that journey, which was over about 4 years, um, we began to realize that we weren't really realizing the value yet out of our data. And that got me thinking a great deal about why, why was that? Certainly, um, we had spent money on the technology, we were producing dashboards, we had a far better view of what our data actually was. But it was clear that the business didn't realize or didn't feel like they were realizing the real benefit out of what that technology that we had implemented should be bringing. And looking at the statistics, I think it'd be fair to say that many businesses feel the same way. We obviously security is a huge issue on everybody's mind, and I probably don't want to spend a lot of time talking about security today. I'm more interested in talking about data governance adoption statistics, and I think this one a statistic on the right-hand side of the screen just really says it all. 2022 statistic, 95% of executives cited cultural factors as blocking big data adoption compared with just 5% citing technology. So our technology is not the issue. There are other issues that are blocking adoption of our realizing the asset, our data assets. The other statistic that I find absolutely fascinating on the set is the bottom one under productivity and usability. The CMMI website states 52% of C-suite executives have dismissed data because they just simply couldn't understand it. So I find that one very interesting as well. And what does that say about what data we are actually dishing up and its usefulness? Obviously, data quality remains a huge issue, and in fact, in almost all of the companies I've worked in and the companies I'm working with now at Fusion 5, data quality remains a significant part of what we need to address when we're looking at both technology and governance going forward. So I think the next point is that we have invested in as businesses in technology. I think we're realizing that technology hasn't solved our problem, but what it has done is it has definitely increased awareness about data as an asset. It's increased awareness about issues that we have with data and use of data. And so from that point of view, I think from the early days, we've really moved up the maturity staircase, the data governance maturity staircase, in that we actually understand a great deal more about what we have and what we don't have. And so I think the thing that's becoming really patently clearer to many of us is that what we're aware of now is what's missing is the strategy piece, right? So what do we have? What do we want to do with it? And how are we going to begin to realize the real value out of our data? So I think it would be fair to say that like we're moving up the staircase. I think we certainly are more repeatable about what we're doing. We have defined projects, but we're not really in a managed or optimized state in terms of our of understanding our strategy for data within our businesses. I probably want to talk a little bit before I begin to talk about this particular slide about data governance frameworks and activities. And there are many views of this. Some are very heavy. If we take a look at governance frameworks out of the banking industry or out of insurance industries, these are very heavy in terms of the processes and the activities that are specified to achieve a good position, a good governed state. There's more modern frameworks. Gartner has a lovely modern framework. Informatica looks at 10 facets for data. These are much lighter frameworks. Almost all of them have a common theme in terms of what processes and activities should occur in governance. We've talked about risk and compliance, value generation, how we organize our org structure, how we organize the businesses, roles and responsibilities. And that brings us to something we'll spend a little bit of time talking about later on, which is stewardship. Data quality as a really important component of any governance framework. Lifecycle management is a really important component, and obviously security and privacy, very topical and often the thing that people focus on most when they think about governance, and that causes us some problems sometimes in terms of implementing governance. Data architecture is another component of a good framework or a good governance plan, and obviously classification of data and metadata and the ability to audit. So these components, whether you're looking at a lighter modern a framework or a more traditional, heavier governance framework, these are all components that we look at when we're planning a data strategy and talking about data governance. What I think is significant is how do we take those heavy activities, and turn them into practical action. And so I want to focus today on talking about two key practical activities that I think will help you to realize real value out of your data and move you along that maturity track. So not surprisingly, these two key activities have to do with um, the two of the key pillars of any strategy. They have to do with process and with people. And I'm will have to say that probably the most significant trajectory to your success when talking about governance is people. It's empowering people, is understanding the role that people play in governance. And I can recall when I was interviewing for my job at Downer for general manager of data and analytics, the one of the interviewees asked me, how would I know when I was successful in the role? What did good look like? What did success mean to me? And my response then, and would still be my response now, was that I would know that I was successful when every person in the business had a line on their performance plan that indicated that they were responsible for data or for information, right? And just like we have a very heavy focus on safety in business now, I think the next step in maturing around data is having a focus on individuals being responsible for the information that they create within a business, and being KPI'd on that. And whilst that is a big ask to implement, that for me was my success criteria. Did I achieve that? No, we're still working on that. But I genuinely believe that empowering people and getting people to understand the significance of data as an asset is very important.
Hey, Becky, we've just got a question here. And the question is, what are the most important components of data governance in your mind?
Right.
And I think you've touched already a little bit on this through saying people and processes. Yeah.
Yeah, so four key components, and we have touched on this: people, process, technology, are core components. How to break that down a bit. Can you mute? Data governance is all about the data. It's all about who has access to the data. It's all about making sure that people who need to use the data have access to the data. It's what we do with our data. It's understanding whether or not we have the right data for what we're trying to achieve. And again, that segues very nicely into the topic around discover and organize your data, and why that's a significant and important strategic activity for implementing a data strategy. And I think I would like to talk a little bit about organizing and reviewing and an understanding what it is we do as a business, understanding our business capabilities and those processes within our business capabilities that actually create data. So a big part of a key activity is actually reviewing what your business capabilities are, reviewing those processes that generate data, and understanding what we actually do and what we do for our customers and clients and what adds value. The next step in that is to actually map your business capabilities to the data that you have and that you're producing. And are you collecting the data that you need? Are the processes that you have generating the right data? And we all know that, look, if we've got dirty data, if we've got issues with data, almost always the issue is with the processes that are feeding that data being broken. And so actually reviewing capabilities, reviewing the processes, and understanding what data is generated out of those processes is a really significant part of moving along that journey. Because almost can guarantee you that what you will find is that you're missing things. You're missing pieces of data that you need to help you to actually realize the real benefit of the capability of the work that you're actually doing. And so from this, we can identify gaps. We can identify gaps that we need to fill in terms of what data that we are generating, the cleanliness of that data, how we're collecting that data, and we can build from that a clear data initiative roadmap, things that we need to do to improve the use of our data. Okay. Got another question?
Another question we got was what group in the organization should be responsible for the data governance?
Right. So roles and responsibilities in data governance. One of my biggest mistakes that I made at Downer, and it took me some time to realize that, was that the governance council that we set up was really set up and run by me, and I reported into IT. And so the whole governance project, if you like, was really viewed as IT as opposed to business driven. And what really turned that around was when we had some very keen senior key people actually saying, we're going to set up our own governance body within our particular business function because we need to solve some problems. And the light bulb absolutely went off for me in terms of the fact that whilst there were business representatives on our governance council, that that it was seen because of my running that council or setting that body up as particularly IT focused. And the business didn't really, at that point, was not realizing the value out of that particular council. And so we begin to actually really make real progress when the responsibility for the governance of the data was actually embedded into the business. In terms of other roles and responsibilities, it's going to depend entirely on the maturity of the business as to whether they have a chief data officer, whether that data officer reports into the CEO, whether we have the data function reporting into finance. So it would depend entirely on the maturity of the organization in terms of their understanding the importance of data as an asset. But it's very clear that where we are successful in having governance, it is business run. Technology may have a seat at the table, but it certainly is not driving the governance effort. Might add a little bit more about roles and responsibilities. Typically in our frameworks that we were talking about, there are key roles and responsibilities, and we have data owners, we have data custodians, we have governance councils, um, we have data stewards. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the importance of that particular role, because I think that's the second key activity, which is worth highlighting in terms of what we can do to really move our strategy along. So a data steward is a role, and we can talk a little bit about what they do. And that may vary again greatly on the business, but they're primarily responsible for managing and protecting the data and ensuring the quality of the data and helping to grow the awareness within the business of how data uses impacts their function and impacts the business. And it's an absolute key role in terms of championing your data as an asset, or your data as a product, focus within the business. And how you go about identifying, training, and empowering data stewards again will depend a great deal on the maturity of the business and the type of business. But there are 5 key models for data stewardship. Um, this is a bit of work that was done by 2 lovely ladies, Jill Deich and Annalise Polsky, and they've done a lovely paper on 5 different models of looking at stewardship. And they talk a little bit about stewardship organized by a subject area, right? So a subject area could be something like a customer or a product or a location or financials. And you could drill that down even further, perhaps, and think about it a little bit. If you wanted to get slightly technical, think about it. You could drive stewardship by objects or entities, or collections of objects or entities as well. The second model for stewardship is by function. And again, pretty obvious. Finance, sales, uh, distribution, support, those sorts of things. The third model is by business process. And this one's quite interesting. So if you think a little bit about a campaign process or a procurement process or a sales process, stewardship or ownership of the data by that process. Fourth model is by system. And this is by far and away the most common um, role that I've seen stewards play, both stewards and what we call data custodians. So data custodians are really defined as the technical role who's responsible for the data inside a particular system, and it's generally an IT role, whereas stewardship is a business role. So if we're looking at stewardship by system, sometimes we have a billing system or a work management system or a financial system. A steward may own a piece or part of that data within that system. Generally, they won't, particularly if it's financials, you wouldn't own all of the data when stewardship for all the data, but you might break it down again by subject area, or by function within that stewardship model. And the final one is by project. So it's really PMO driven, and as a project delivers, they put forward stewards and owners for data that they're delivering out of the project. Another question.
Yeah, the question is really around that stewardship that you were just talking about. And I'm just reading the question. It says, give an example of how you tried to get someone to be on board with data governance. So someone that's a little bit resistant against actually being part of the whole data governance. How did you approach that?
Really good question, Voter, and it's a hard one actually. So it's always what's in it for me. What do you mean you're going to give me another job to do? Because we rarely hire stewards just to be data stewards, right? They're usually somebody that has got knowledge within the business. They know the data well. They've been around for a while. They're an advocate for for that particular area of the business and those particular processes. And so they're busy, and they don't necessarily want to take on another role. So it's really important to talk a little bit about what's in it for them, what's in it for me. It must be relevant to them, and need to begin to understand the importance of why that role and governing and caring for the data uh, adds such value to the business being able to make decisions and solve problems. And if you are able to actually demonstrate the gap between governance and where the data is sitting and how it is a solution to their problems, that's a good way to bring people on board. There isn't a single one of us who doesn't wish for accurate, timely data that people trust, and that you know that when you're actually making decisions, that the data that you're looking at is something that is accurate. And so bringing people along for the ride, getting people to understand that stewardship actually promotes that accuracy and that trust in the data is a good way to actually bring people along for the journey.
Yes, that's there's actually another question, and this time around it is about how do you track your progress in your data governance program, and how do you measure the success then of it?
Also, a very, very good question. And I think um, starting with the people, how many data stewards do you have that are trained, active, working, participating and being successful in that role? So, what's the actual number of stewards that you have in the business is a good metric. The second one, and really, is the improvement of data quality. So, are we seeing a marked improvement? And might be worth talking a little bit about um, the concept of technical governance versus business governance, just to make a point there. So, one of the things which, if your partner or your vendor is good at doing, um, is to make sure that we build technical governance in by design, so that within our systems we have a way of measuring the quality of the data that we output. So part of your metrics for understanding that your program is working is those exception reports that are coming out of your with your reporting should be giving you indications that the quality of the data is improving greatly, right? Um, so what else? Cost savings, right? Are we now actually beginning to see the real benefit of some of this reporting in terms of actually managing our productivity and lowering our costs? Pretty significant if we can actually set out to say, here's a metric I would like to measure to. Are my people more productive because we are actually able to tell them how much time they spend on various, I'm making this up as I go, but various jobs. Number of data policies implemented. That could be another really good metric. And explicit business rules documented. We could also talk a little bit about, are we defining our data? Is our glossary of terms, is our data catalog being populated with definitions? Are people using that catalog? So there are a number of things like that that help us to actually measure our progress along the governance path and our success. Voter, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Um, No, I just think that it's absolutely what you say is so right. It's about measuring also the usage of these things we've put in place, similar to what you would do with dashboards, to be able to see who uses the dashboards, and so that you can tweak them, because it's a living thing, right? It's not something that is just a one. So you would want to change that. Becky, there's another question that's come through, and I think it's quite an interesting one. It talks about, is there anything like a standard approach to data governance? So kind of a vanilla data governance. Do you get something like that?
Gosh, no. I I don't think there's a standard approach to data governance. I think it depends a great deal on the business itself, the industry silo you sit in. Um, for example, governance for a bank is really, really different than governance for an engineering firm, and their focus is very much maybe dictated by legislation, right? In an engineering space, it may be around safety. In banking, it may be around the auditability of what they need to do. So I don't think one size fits all, and I don't think it's easy to to do that. I think what's important is the process that you go through to actually determine what data you need and what data is actually going to add real value to you. So those key activities that I was talking a little bit about in terms of understanding what data you need is very important to actually looking at what size of governance fits in terms of what's going forward. Another question?
Yes. So we've got a question here that says, can you give us an example? Because in the slide you've got build the data initiative roadmap, initial roadmap. What does a example of a data governance roadmap look like?
Good question. Really good question. Look, I have built a number of roadmaps over the years, and I tend to actually try to build them around different components of what I'm trying to achieve. So the last roadmap I built included not just simply a swim lane for data governance, but it included a swim lane for uh, implementation. It included a swim lane for people. And so within each one of those categories, I had a number of initiatives that I was trying to achieve. And those initiatives really were identified by looking at what we needed to do in what areas and working with the business to understand what was missing in what their pain points were, what was actually missing in their data landscape. So um, my roadmap looked out over 100 days and then to a year and then to 3 years, and we never ever got much further than that. And usually the year um, projects were good. So we looked at implementing new security rules, for example, inside the warehouse was a key thing at what was one of the things on my roadmap. In the governance, we looked at um, appointing stewards and looking at what business areas that we needed to appoint stewardship across. Um, right. And so the roadmap really needs to look at what governance is required and put that into measurable activities and make sure that you tie that back to why you're asking for that. We need to make sure we are identifying roles and responsibilities. We need to make sure that the roadmap talks about how you're going to measure your success, what policies might be required, and what tooling might be needed as well, and then plans to revisit the roadmap at the end. I want to talk a little bit about what we do at Fusion 5 and our promise to you in terms of working with you to actually achieve your data and analytics needs. Um, and it's very important to understand partnership is a key thing for us. We want to be part of your team. We have very experienced people. We can hit the ground running, and that's a significant part in terms of delivering on the strong partnership. We will absolutely commit to getting it done right, and we deliver that through great planning and smart execution. And we very, very important different gates in terms of our 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 management methodology in terms of quality gates. And one thing just would like to highlight there, that's the good. What is your definition of done? When have we got it right? What have, how, what would look good to you? And so we always identify that up front in terms of our commitment with working with our partners. Forward thinking, we'll offer the best innovative ideas and solutions. If there's a better way, we will help you find it. As I started the webinar off, we are product agnostic. It's not about products in particular. We don't sell a particular product in the data and analytics team. We support products. So we'll work across many different technologies, and we'll also make recommendations if we think there's a better way or a better set of tools that you might be using. And finally, we very much partner around support, and we'll be there to support whatever we deliver going forward.
Hey, Becky, can we get into another question maybe? Um, here's a question around asking whether there's an end date to data governance or a steady state of data governance.
No, I don't believe there is a steady state for governance. It's a journey. One of my team members once said, "It's not a journey, Becky, it's an adventure." But it's a journey. It's a journey that we go on, and I don't think we want that journey to have a finite end in any way, because technology changes, the things that are important in terms of our products change. So it's a continuous process, and part of that continuous process needs to be a feedback loop, right? Are we being successful? Is this governance achieving what we want to achieve? And so I think it's quite important to test that very regularly as part of your governance plan. Is have the Are the stewards working? Is that process, the way we've organized them, is this delivering the outcomes that we want? So what works for you today may not necessarily work for you tomorrow. I can certainly tell you a few stories about implementing a technology that very quickly became obsolete, and a new technology came along, and we had to just really re-gear our thinking. And I think AI is a great example of that's going to have a profound impact on governance, and make governance a great deal easier from a technical governance perspective. So I think we have to have a continuous approach to updating our governance strategy.
And perhaps another question around what the biggest problem is with data governance implementation.
That's a really good question as well. Two things, I think. First one is way too much technology, and having the focus be primarily on the technology as opposed to the process and the people. So that's one. The second would be change, and how we get people to think a little bit about what they need to change to actually have a data-centered culture. I think it would be really vastly important not to underestimate the resistance to implementing some of these things. And so where I started the conversation about coming up that maturity path, we're gotten to the point now where businesses actually realize that they do need a strategy. It needs to be business driven as opposed to technology driven. But the technology can throw a spanner in the work every time if there's too much.
You mentioned too many technologies. Do you mean with that too many different types of technologies, and not a uniformed technology platform or something?
Yeah, so like a good example of that could be something along the lines of one area of the business says, I need a lake. I need a data lake. This is the storage capacity that I want to have. Another side of the business says, no, 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 I need this for my database. I've used this database for yonks. It works. I don't want to change. I don't want a lake. I want a SQL database. Yeah, so it's how do we standardize on that technology, so that we're not managing and maintaining disparate pieces of technology, which is really what I mean by too much, too many different technologies.
I think here's another a very interesting question, and it's around what are the elements of data governance that can accelerate the business?
I think one of the things that helped us most at Downer was to try to get people not to operate in silos, right? We Downer was really a company of acquisitions and had very neat little silos that we operated in. And so one of the biggest things that we did to accelerate the process was to actually get silos to begin to work together on the governance, right? In terms of what data would help each other. So if I'm collecting data about a customer when I'm out laying asphalt on a road, how can that benefit other parts of the business? So we really were able to accelerate getting people to think about governance and by actually trying to break down the silos between the different teams. We also, were able to actually open up some of the sources. That was quite controversial, because we talk an awful lot about protecting the data and making sure that only the right people who should be seeing the data can use the data. But where we could open up data and mask that data so that it was useful to understand our business, that was really interesting as well. The outcomes from opening up data, opening up that data we were allowed to open up and exposing that data so that people could actually get a real understanding about what we did. So those are two really interesting areas where we actually, I think, really accelerated. Another comment I'll make is that different within a business itself, just like different businesses that are different maturity levels within a business itself, there is a different maturity amongst different functions. And one of the things that really helped us to understand that and to assist the business was a little initiative that we did, was to survey. We had a standard data maturity survey, right, that we delivered. And it was another way we also checked our progress. So when we started the process, we surveyed the different business areas on how they used their data, what they had, what they didn't have, what they felt about the quality of the data, those kinds of things. And then after a period of time, we ran that survey again. And that really helped to accelerate some understanding about the importance of governance within the business. Any further questions, Wouter, from the...
We don't actually have any particular questions further than
Okay,
this received.
all right. Well, thank you very much, team. I enjoyed talking to you about data governance today and the key strategies that I think can help you to accelerate that. More action, less talk. I'm really happy to answer any questions. My details are available. So would enjoy interacting with you or talking with you about your data governance journey, data strategy journey, and how we might accelerate that for you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Becky. That was awesome.